previous video, I showed you guys how I made my first iteration of my beetleweight punch spinner Hodag. It is a pretty ambitious bot, at least for me, because I don't actually have that much experience in combat robotics. So trying to make my first beetleweight and have my first spinner be a robot that is a punch spinner, which there's not exactly that many people to copy in order to make it. So it's kind of sort of on my own to try to make it. It resulted in a subpar robot, in my opinion. The fights that I did win at that event, I pretty much won by being a control bot. And so we definitely need to do some work in order to get this thing to be where I want it to be, because hopefully in June of 2025, I will be taking Hodag to NHRL, and that's going to be, if I'm driving that far out east, I want to bring my best foot forward. So let's go over Hodag's latest changes as well as its first event of the year. The first problem that I had to fix was the fact that the punch mechanism would not punch. Basically, I was using a timing belt for the punch mechanism with the servo, and the timing belt would constantly get out of step. So if I punched once, even if it was not into anything, there was no impact, it would still get out of step. And so I was able to fix this by having it fixed both at the pulley and at the slide mechanism. So it's kind of, instead of it being like a loop that ends at the slide, it's now a loop, or it's not even really a loop. It's one strand that goes from the pulley, which isn't even a pulley anymore, to the slide, and the other side goes from the pulley that's at the servo around to a pulley around a pulley in the front, and then the end goes into the slide mechanism. This way, the only way for the timing belt to get out of step is unless it literally comes disassembled. Now that we have it assembled, we can talk about the rest of the changes, or most of the rest of the changes. Starting with the top and bottom, you'll notice that these are black instead of the aluminum silver. That's because they're now printed out of polycarbonate. Basically, I wanted something that I could iterate with pretty quickly, and I have a feeling that even after the next event, I'm going to make changes. But eventually, I want to switch to to carbon fiber, because the aluminum was just so dang heavy. As you can see on the bottom, I have these two holes, which basically makes it so no matter which side of the plate is tapered, then it can be used, so I can't accidentally taper the wrong side like last time. Also, I flipped the tires to the outside, basically so the pulley's on the inside instead of the outside for the front tires. This left more room for the electronics while still, having everything in there. Consequently, there's less material here between the outside and the tire, which is I'm more worried about the shoulder bolt keeping them on than I am the wheel itself, because as you can see here, the shoulder bolt is just barely poking out. I also made some slight changes to the geometry of the back just so it's more easy to print, because that rounded back just wasn't able to print. Also, it's hard, you can't really tell like looking at it, but I changed the sides in a way, the side profile, so that I can print it this side down, because before it was like a loft, so it wasn't perfectly flat, so I couldn't print it outside down on the print bed. And the front is obviously the most changed, with these little flanges to keep robots from rolling up on top of the weapon and destroying my weapon, like what happened with both Grim and Skippy. And you'll also notice these whale teeth on the front with the hole for a shoulder bolt going through right there. This is so I can experiment with different fork configurations, because I've been struggling with going against vertical spinners, and I just need to work on my ground game, because I notice a lot of times if I get hit from the side, that wedge on the front just wasn't doing anything to anything coming from the sides. This is an example of the wedge, and it sort of goes on there like that, and then a shoulder bolt comes through to keep it on. Later, I want to make this with a metal plate on the front, so it's a little bit more protected. But for now, this is what it's going to be going into the first event, and I'll show the forks in a minute. Let's talk about the weapon assembly by itself. Overall, this feels much more robust and sort of sturdy than our previous one. It felt like it was basically just hanging on by hopes and dreams, but now this one is held together by a shoulder bolt, since we are using the Repeat Robotics hub motor, and we have these standoffs and screws back here. These are basically PLA plus spacers, and the black 3D printed is polycarbonate. It was polycarbonate before, but it wasn't held together with the shoulder bolt and with these two spacers. I had some goofy 3D printed stuff going on back here, and I had nothing up here. I want to replace the polycarbonate with UHMW at some point, but that would have to be machined, so I'm not in a super big hurry to do that. For the weapon itself, I mentioned the Repeat Robotics hub motor, but we also have a 2.5-inch weapon blade instead of the 2-inch weapon blade. It's also an 1/8 of an inch thicker and has a little bit more of a rake angle. The previous version didn't have a rake angle at all. And these wires will have to be glued or taped down. I kind of want to move this slot back more because I have this slot here in order to get the wires in here. But I kind of want to have it back further so I can actually use a zip tie to hold these back, which will especially be useful when this is made out of UHMW, since UHMW does not like adhesive. It doesn't play well with it. But overall, I feel a lot better about this design than our previous one. We got some short AR500 forks. God damn it. I'm going to need you to not rub up against that. These are shorter because otherwise they'd be pretty heavy, plus they'll be less likely to bend. And then we also have some longer forks. And got two different lengths here just to see which works better. And they also have sort of a 2-dimensional feature or a 3-dimensional feature. That way they can kind of get underneath people even on an angle. And we have this divot here to act sort of as a spring to keep them some tension to keep them on the ground. And then we have some wedgelets. We got one with the spring feature like in the forks and one without. These are more so to prevent the opponent's forks from getting underneath me, more so than they're about me getting underneath my opponent. So we'll see how well these work. Also, like I mentioned before, the whole front, means that it should be pretty easy to sort of mix and match as well as sort of experiment between events. After these changes, I took Hodag down to SEMO down in Missouri. I also took Jackalope to that event, so that video should already be up, and the link should be on screen now if you want to check that out. But without further ado, I'm going to let future me take it away. Our first fight is against a double wedge bot called the Power of Evil. So by double wedge bot, I mean it's a multi-bot where one of the wedges is 2 pounds and the other is 1 pound, adding up to 3 pounds. I haven't fought a multi-bot before, so I'm not really quite sure how this is going to end up going for me. But since they're both wedges, I'm decided to run with the weapon in the forward position instead of retracting it back, since I'm not worried about any weapon-to-weapon exchanges. Unfortunately, you guys missed it because of the camera angle. There were actually two pretty important pins that were happening on the bottom of the screen that you guys missed. The first one that happened in the middle of the match is where both of them were behind me and pinning me at the same time. Kind of like how you saw earlier when we were front to front and one was behind the other, because that's sort of the only way they're able to hold their own against my drivetrain since it's so much stronger than them individually. And later in the match, I pinned one of the multi-bots and then the other one came up behind me, thus us sort of pinning each other. That whole match was pretty chaotic with me feeling like I was playing very defensively the whole time, trying to avoid getting pinned by wriggling off the other one and having to change my attention. Luckily, I was able to get a couple pops and pins in there, so which I think is why I was able to get that judge's decision at the end, because honestly, it was almost a coin flip. It was so close, but I'll take it. And because of that, our next fight is against Elytra. Elytra is a four-wheeled vertical spinner that got second at MRCA finals, so I'm really feeling skeptical about my odds, but hopefully we can get lucky and my bot won't explode.
Fight, robot, fight! Oh, out the gate with box rush. Plenty of weapons. Look at that drum. That weapon hub motor. Oh, there's the roof shot, but not quite. Something came off the top of that. That's okay. Oh, trying to get underneath, trying to get the pin. That is a wide robot. He gets in there. Wheels have come off. Oh, just mangling out there. He's still driving. Oh, launcher just tearing up. Oh, there it is. Out. That's a tap out. We do have a battery exposure. That is a solid hit.
So before we get to the obvious damage, let's talk about the less obvious things. I knew his bot was going to be hit harder than mine. That was just a fact that I knew going in. What I didn't quite realize until after is how much faster his robot is than mine. I think we have similar drive motors, but I had to limit the throttle on Hodag to about 60% because since I'm no longer using the aluminum base plates, I don't have that weight in the bottom, and I was actually running like 200 grams underweight. And so I had to limit it in order to not kick up. And so his bot was just faster than mine. Also, pretty early on, I noticed in the fight, but it's impossible to notice in the footage, but my spinner stopped spinning after I think the first hit. I realized later that the wires were cut and they weren't properly secured. So I'm pretty sure when he got hit, it moved the wires because they weren't secured properly, and I ended up cutting my own wires, and then the weapon was dead, so I couldn't end up punching my weapon into him when I had that brief, like, half a second pin. So the one shot I had, I wasn't able to capitalize on. Then the sides came off, and they came off for two reasons. One, the top plates basically shattered because they're made out of polycarbonate, and the holes, since I used plastite screws to hold everything together, the holes that in the TPU of the printed part were too big. I realized later, compared to the other parts of the robot, they are 50% bigger, so they just didn't have enough material in order to like sort of keep hold. So that's another reason why they just completely fell off. It'll also be a problem later, as just if you keep watching. Also, the front plate shattered from the one hit that completely changed the shape of the front of Hodag. That also made bent a shoulder bolt probably about 30 degrees and made it so I wasn't able to take it out until the end of the event. I was able to salvage that front since it was TPU. It was able to come back to shape. Shoulder bolt, not so much, nor that base plate. And I know Seth Schaefer is probably in the comments right now typing "I told you so," because I know in the last video when I talked about using polycarbonate, he said that was a bad idea. And I kind of knew it was a bad idea going into this, but I wasn't quite ready to commit to the laser cut parts yet. I'm kind of regretting not doing that, but I knew the risks, and I didn't actually lose any expensive parts. All of my electronics were salvageable. Even the cut wires I was able to resolder even at the event. But I knew Elytra was a killer, and I did what I could. I think I lasted longer than some other bots did that day. But with that, I go into the losers bracket. Now that we're in the losers bracket, our next fight is against Real Axle Bit, which is an overhead drill robot. I don't have any special top armor. I just have the same polycarbonate top plates that I showed you guys, so we'll see how this goes. I'm a little bit worried since I don't have any special armor, but we'll see how it holds up.
2, 1, fight robots pilot. Oh, sparks are flying. Oh my goodness. Big sparks on that. Fight on that metal front there. Push it through. Find the spot. Get up and drill. Get this down and drill there. Like it's holes in the wood even. Pushing that right now.
I think it's here where he actually is able to drill into the timing belt that controls the punching mechanism. So after this point, I'm not able to move my spinner forward.
Really? Good pin.
Coming through here. Oh, big sparks come up there. Trying to get that drill bit in there. Could be dangerous to disconnect at any moment.
Oh, get out of here. I missed it. I missed it. Get over here.
Trying to get into it. Still just kind of pushing out of it.
That drove it. So I forgot to take pictures of it, but the top plates actually ended up taking a bit of damage, but only on the center edges, because he was only really able to get the drill in on when I was pinning him, which he actually was doing on purpose, or so he said at least, so he could get the drill hits on me. He was also able to get, like I mentioned before, the weapon belt, at least for the linear mechanism. So I was able to retract it back, but I wasn't able to push it forward. I think in the future, if I would have done it differently, I would have just left the weapon forward. That way he couldn't do that. And I already wasn't afraid of the weapon-to-weapon exchanges. I would have just gotten more hits in. Ultimately, I kind of controlled the pace. I was a little bit faster than him, and I had the ground game, so it was a lot easier for me to get pins on him. I think I probably could have done more to try to get to the side of him, but I was just worried about exposing my sides, even though he probably wouldn't have been able to drill into too much based on how the geometry of my robot is and his robot, but it wouldn't have looked good to get pinned like that. Ultimately, I ended up taking the judge's decision despite that damage. I think it's because it wasn't that important it was like the less important half of my weapon, and I had just so much more control that match. So with that, we are still in the game, and our next fight is against Blister. Blister is a 4-wheel drive dual disc spinner. Normally, I wouldn't be too worried about this matchup, but since Elytra totaled the first copy I have of Hodag, and my second copy of Hodag having the punching mechanism taken out by Axelbit, and my time being split between Jackalope and Hodag, and how complicated the whole punching mechanism is to actually get assembled, I was going into this fight without the punching mechanism, and I basically just taped the vertical spinner in the forward position so it couldn't like slide back at all. And I think cut the other strand of the timing belt to make sure I couldn't accidentally pull it back. And so I'm just going into this fight as a 4-wheel drive vertical spinner. Let's see how that goes.
2, 1, fight, robots fight! Both weapons spinning up. I don't think they're either on full speed. Now we got some full speed. Oh, Blister throwing him almost into the hazard. Something's come off of something. Not sure what that is. Blister with solid underneath. Getting the point on. No, weapon to weapon here. Uh-oh, Blister gonna have to turn himself back over. That's one way to do it. Oh! Another, not a full roof shot. Blister trying to stay away from that metal wall. Hodag with the control, but Blister not having it. Blister shoots him up again. Again. Hodag. Blister looks like he's getting the ground game. Oh, now inverted for Hodag. Up against the wall. Blister just easily getting under that, it looks like. I don't know if it's designed. Oh, Blister with a good corner. 1 minute left in the match. It looks like the forks of Hodag are very flexible, so it looks like they're breaking, but they're really not too bad. We've got a pushing match. Is at a pin in 5, 4, 3, 2. Oh, he went all the way in there, so let's count that. Blister with his weapon back up. He was just saving battery there. Lots of kinetic energy exchange from both of these robots. Another pin. And not a pin, actually just up against the wall. It looks like Hodag might have a little bit more pushing power. Oh, it's the velocity that... Oh, nice clean air time. Since Blister puts Hodag into the air. Great shot, 20 seconds left. These robots are coming down to it. Blister looking for that front hot bite. Not able to get quite there. Up. Oh. 10, 9, 8, 7,
Oh,
6,
I'm a hack.
5, 4, 3, 2. Oh, he's carrying him around by just 5.
For those that couldn't tell from the footage, right at the end there, my TPU fork ended up getting wrapped around his weapon and they had to unstick us at the end. Luckily it happened at the end and not the middle, so they didn't have to stop the fight. As far as the damage I took, the shafts for the punching mechanism even ended up getting bent. I'm pretty sure that's because I was using the steel rods instead of the tungsten carbide I normally use, as well as the fact that I wasn't running it as normal. I just had it in the front the whole time, so I ended up taking more weapon-to-weapon exchanges than the weapon is designed to take. Also, you can't tell from the footage, but the sides were starting to come off, kind of like in the Elytra fight, except for they stayed on, obviously, and obviously it's for the same reason that we saw them come off completely in the Elytra fight. Also, the bottom plate got pretty chewed up. If it was a more damaging weapon, I probably could have been knocked out by that, but luckily that's not the case. Overall, I feel pretty decent about how I drove that match. I think the forks might be a little too flexible because you could bend it. They ended up bending in times I didn't really want them to bend, but maybe I just need more forks too. We'll end up seeing what I end up doing with that. I ended up definitely taking more damage than he did. Ultimately, I ended up losing that one probably because of the damage. And so that marks the end of the day for Hodag, unfortunately. We ended up getting 4th because there was only 8 bots there, but I feel pretty good about how we did, but I definitely can see potential in Hodag, but we definitely have some work to do. Let's go into the changes I need to make real quick. Ironically, by the time you see this, I'll have already made the changes and gone to another event, but let's get into it anyways. I need to change the material of the top and bottom plate. The top plates I'm going to make out of carbon fiber, and I also changed the geometries so that they end up coming in a little bit more in the front so that they can cover up the pulley. That way overhead attacks can't go straight into that pulley. They at least have to go through the top plate first. And for the bottom plate, I'm going to make out of 6061 aluminum because I have the weight for it, and it'll allow me to go at a higher throttle without having to limit the throttle, so I can go faster without having to worry about the front of the robot kicking up. And I made some holes and stuff to make it a little bit lighter so that I'm not wasting too much weight on the bottom. Unsurprisingly, I've already changed the CAD so that the holes are the right size for the sides. Going to the next event, I'm probably just going to put super glue in the holes on the bottom, just on the bottom, and that should hold because that aluminum should be strong enough that nothing crazy should happen. And I don't want to obviously super glue the top plates because I'll have to get them off at some point. And I think just doing the bottom should be good enough because I think that is kind of where most of the strength comes from anyways. I might also mess with some fork designs since they were a little bit more, the TPU forks were a little more flexible than I wanted them to, but we'll see what I end up coming up with. I actually haven't done that part yet, but because I didn't have too many specific thoughts on it until I was recording this video, but now I have some ideas that I might try out. Maybe I will, there's B-roll of that going on right now, maybe not, but overall, I think the changes I need to make are going to be easy, but obviously they're going to be pricey because I'm going to have to get some laser cut parts, but it is what it is. Feeling pretty good about my odds going into the next event, and I think once I get used to driving this more complicated robot and getting used to driving a spinner, I think we have a good chance of Hodag being a halfway decent bot. If you're looking to get caught up, the video to my right on the bottom is my previous video on Hodag and its first event. And the video on the top to my right will be the next video on Hodag if that video is already out, which it might not be if you're watching this in the first 2 weeks or so. Instead, it'll be the video on Jackalope, which I also took to the SEMO event.